You're listening to the Public Finance Live podcast series, brought to you by the PF editorial team directly from CIPFA's 2026 annual conference in London, England. You can listen to our full series of episodes on the big issues being discussed at this year's conference by searching PF Live wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting the podcast section of the Public Finance website. Hello, I'm John Watkins, Group Editor of Public Finance and your host for this PF Live podcast. This episode is sponsored by Norse Group, Britain's largest local authority trading company, offering care, consultancy and a range of commercial services on behalf of local authorities across the country. And our discussion today will explore whether the LATCo model is the best option for difficult times. To discuss that, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Justin Galliford, CEO of Norse. Good to see you again, Justin.
And you.
Thank you for joining us again this year. And Anna Randle, Chief Executive of New Local, the independent think tank and network with a mission to transform public services and unlock community power. Anna, welcome to you too.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
It's good to have you both. Thanks so much for joining. We are broadcasting live from the event as we do every year. So if there is a big announcement about moving to the next session or something, I apologise, but don't get too distracted. We'll just plough on through it. As Justin said, it's a bit of authenticity for us. So let's get into this really important and topical issue. We're speaking, but before we do, we are speaking on the first day of Public Finance Live, and we like to set the scene by asking our guests to tell us what they're excited about seeing or hearing or getting from the conference. So can you each just give us a little bit of that?
Sure. For me, I think we've got an important day tomorrow for a lot of local authorities, of course, with outcomes for LGR. So just getting a feel for how people think that might pan out and, of course, what that means next. So, it's such an interesting sector to be a part of because it's always changing. And I think we're on the cusp of some of the biggest changes we've seen in a generation. So there's a really exciting atmosphere here today. I hope that excitement's still around tomorrow once the announcements are out. Anna?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that and also build on it. I think it's a really interesting time in local government and for government and public services more broadly. We've got the devolution announcements expected this week, but we've also got a new Prime Minister coming in on Monday who has set his stall out around a really powerful devolution agenda, which could have some really exciting and interesting consequences for local government and their partners. So interesting times and looking forward to hearing how people are feeling about all of that.
Yeah, there's an awful lot going on and a good networking opportunity to get people's views and discuss those. So let's now get into this really important issue. So many local authorities are facing significant change through devolution, local government reorganisation, ongoing financial pressures, the things that we talk about seemingly at this conference every year. How has that changed the conversation around service delivery models?
I think from our perspective, talking to people, as always, it's got people focused on price. But we've got to remember that for all of the talk around devolution at the moment, there's really no more money available in the sector. So we've got those ongoing cost pressures, as well as considering how we reimagine authorities as we move into new unitaries, or indeed under devolution. And then, of course, what that means for transforming services on the ground on a tight budget. So it's a really interesting mix, which I think requires some real innovation, creative thinking.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Justin. I think what we see in our work with local government is, not surprisingly, ever more focus on how to get best value from the public pound. And that's not just about the sort of traditional service efficiencies. It's also about how we achieve better outcomes and better social value impacts from the investments that local authorities make in their services and through their partners. I think the kind of devolution agenda and the Burnham agenda really will encourage us to think even more about that. How can we really do the best things for our communities in our places? How can local authorities work and deliver services in new ways that help achieve that?
In terms of how local authorities tackle that and the direction they go in, they have more options than ever before, it seems. Outsourcing, bringing services back in-house through a traditional DLO or establishing a LATCo, as we talked about in the intro. So how do they assess which model is right for their particular circumstances?
Well, I think from my perspective, first of all, you've got to be really clear on what it is you're seeking to achieve. Now, that might sound really obvious. It's no longer just about delivering a set of services as is. We know we've got these cost pressures. We know we're moving into hopefully a new era of what local government looks like. there's a real opportunity to redesign and focus on the preventative. So a key part of all of that is adding in the social value, and that's something that New Local are so keen on. So you've got to be clear on what you're trying to achieve, and then you've got to go on your design journey. I think collaboratively is definitely a way forward with the right people from the right agencies to really make sure that what you design endures, delivers value for money, but increasingly delivers social impact. As a group, that's something where we're really focused on.
Anna, how do they choose the best route?
Yep, I would agree with that. I think it's all about thinking which option is going to enable us to achieve the broadest impact across the outcomes that we're seeking in this place. How are we going to get that alignment of values between organisations that are providing services on behalf of local communities, and how are we going to get the flexibilities in the way that we deliver the services as well? Because as we said just now, things keep changing all the time.
So, I mean, I think you've got to have an open mind. We know that classically, yes, you could take it back in-house, but a period of such change through LGR, which house you're taking it into, politely. You could look at putting it out to the market, and there'll be some capacity for that. But I also think the market's a little unsure at the moment of how a landscape looks. So I think we need certainty for market to really engage constructively on price and added value. And then you can look at running things in partnerships. And of course, that's what we do. So I would always encourage people to consider that. But whether it's us or someone else, picking that right partner, making sure that broadly speaking, your aims are aligned and that you feel the part you work with, you can do so on an enduring basis. I think taking those elements into that kind of traditional analysis of a business case is really key, but just widening out your thought process to consider the variables of today and the challenges they bring.
Yeah, and Justin, we've had lots of conversations about LATCos over the various events, public finance events we've done together, and you often use this phrase about it offering the best of both worlds, combining commercial agility and public service value. But just for our listeners, explain what you mean by that, what that looks like in a practical sense. What does it really mean for local authorities?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a really good question. I think from a commercial perspective, it's a standalone company. The way we provide them is to partner with people. So we bring commercial acumen to a LATCo. But nonetheless, you could aim to establish a LATCo and have that commercial acumen so that you've got commercial drivers, people that are focused on managing a bottom line and trying to bring in a return or a surplus, which helps fund those services. But at the same time, it still has a high degree of control, the same as if it was in a local authority. So you can think about your governance arrangements. If you want, you can have members on board as board members or officers, or indeed non-exec directors that your authority appoints that really understand the strategic aims and priorities of an authority. So when you bring those things together and you really invest time and effort into it, what you get is that hybrid model where it's got a commercial ethos, but it's got public sector roots. And that's at the heart of what we do. And we found it very successful.
And for a long time, we've been sort of writing about, the need for local authorities to deliver better outcomes while reducing costs.
Yeah.
How does a LATCo help authorities improve efficiency without compromising service quality and experience for end users?
I mean, I think there's two elements to that. Operationally, I would say that when you have a commercial focus, you're always looking at next level of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have good links with others in the sector and sector knowledge to bring fresh ideas. But equally, if you're setting a LATCo up and you're bringing people in externally to your authority, you can bring those other experiences in too. And I think it'd be really interesting to get Anna's view. The other element is the value add, that's social value. And it certainly isn't local authorities can't deliver that. But a LATCo has a broader ability to be able to do it without quite as many constraints. So it may be that social value, not related directly to the service being provided, but something that's really important to an authority, and the LATCo can act as a vehicle to leverage that and deliver capability. A very brief example is that we do an awful lot of work supporting food hubs in Norfolk, but we're not directly related to that service. There's a natural fit there, so we're giving an extra level of return back to our shareholder in Norfolk County Council.
Anna?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where the alignment of values in the LATCo model and what local authorities are all about in terms of improving local lives, achieving the best possible outcomes right across the board. And so I think the LATCo model is really interesting in the way that it enables and facilitates that alignment and that wider contribution to local outcomes.
And what about ongoing flexibility? We know that control and flexibility are increasingly important as councils respond to rapidly changing
Absolutely.
local needs. You know, there are things are coming in, things are expanding really, really quickly. So how does the LATCo model enable them to adapt and redesign services more effectively along the way?
Well, I think there's probably never a truer moment to exemplify that than where we are now. And we know that we're going to tomorrow hear about outcome of LGR for many areas. But nonetheless, existing authorities have to keep providing services. So if you think about what a LATCo can do, it can do two things in the current climate, specific to LGR. It can help aggregate services. So a new unitary, which previously had several district councils providing the same service in different ways, you can bring that in and begin to align it. It also gives you strategic think space as an authority. So you're focusing on making sure, the dreaded safe and legal is happening. You may not just be able to focus at the moment on those key frontline elements, but you're going to have to align and transform. Put it in a LATCo, get some of that simple transformation done over, let's say, a 5-year period, and it gives you strategic breathing space. Then you can, in 5 years' time, when your new authority is formed and you've got strategic vision and clarity, you can take those services out to the market because you've aligned them better, so it's more attractive to the market from a price perspective and risk perspective. You could bring it all in-house if you want, or leave it where it is. And I think the other element, we talk about aggregation, the other element is preventing disaggregation. We know that with the timetable as it currently looks, for some of those services normally provided by a county council, whereas adult social services, whether that's children's services or highways, fragmenting them, although it may be a longer term objective, is really difficult from a price element and from a risk perspective. So keeping it in a joint venture again for that first 5-year period allows you that think space to really design well, and then take another view in 5 years' time. And of course, with all of that, still sits our wrapper of what social value do you want us to try and help deliver. So I think it's a really powerful complement at the moment to help with that kind of broader change agenda.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, again, I would go back to that alignment of values of LATCos and local authorities. We're all in it together, trying to achieve the best outcomes for residents and in communities. And I think that some of the things that Jason has talked there about aggregation and disaggregation, this is about LATCos operating as fully aligned partners to local government that stay focused on delivering residents services in the way that they need through transitions that they don't necessarily need to worry about. And I think that's what we're hearing from Justin.
Yeah, there may be some hesitancy among local authorities, in relation to sort of perceived complexity and government requirements around setting up a LATCo, I guess. Is that a misconception about the model? And how do organisations like yours, I guess, help them work around those perceived complexities?
Yeah, I think it's an understandable set of concerns, and rightly so. You've got to make sure that you really understand the path an authority is going to move down and then the associated risks. But, really, I think the LATCo path is so well trodden and there's such excellent guidance out there that you can manage any concerns and de-risk it really quickly. Ultimately, it comes down to governance. And I think you do have to invest time in governance at the front end. But if you consider other options, if you're going to take it out to the market where you're going to have a fairly complex procurement exercise, or indeed you're going to bring it in-house, and you really invest in particularly the back office structure to be able to bring something in-house, actually from a cost and a time perspective, I think it's still far more efficient and flexible than those other models may be. So when you get into the detail and you look at some of the guidance, SIPFA do some great stuff and local partnerships do some great stuff. And there are many others, and we certainly work with our customers really carefully through a governance framework. I think it's all really manageable in today's world.
And you agree on that's a bit of a misconception, the complexity around setting up a LATCo?
I think complexity is sometimes seen as a bad thing, but complexity sometimes is required because this is not an easy thing to do, and these are really important things to get right. I think what I would add to what Justin said is that this is not an entirely new model. There are really good tried and tested models out there. There are local authorities who've been doing this for some time. There are local authorities still setting up new LATCos now. So if you're in doubt about what the process looks like, how it feels to go through it, you can go and speak to some of those organisations that have trodden that path and know how that worked for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that aren't considering the LATCo model, might be, for example, looking at an insourcing model, are there questions that you would urge them to think about before confirming which approach they want to go with?
Yeah, I think what I'd encourage people to think about is investing in that business case. Quite quite often we see that there might be an underestimate of the amount of back office resource that's required. Now that depends from authority to authority, and I think in particular, if you become by and large a commissioning authority, atypically you won't have the health and safety to the right structure you need to be able to really deliver frontline services. You may not have the HR support that you used to have when you had DLOs, and IT is another big thing as well. And then again, I think it comes to the point when we think about social value. If using it as a vehicle for social value is important, do you have a wherewithal within a current administration, the current setup, to be able to do that, or will you need extra expertise anywhere?
Nothing to add.
Brilliant. Okay, and looking ahead, where does the LATCo model go from here? Does it become an increasingly important part of local government service delivery, especially, I guess, as councils continue to balance that financial sustainability with the need for rising public service expectations?
Well, I think it's really interesting. We've obviously always been advocates of a LATCo model. Yeah, I think it's got an awful lot of mileage.
Yep.
It's got a lot to give and support with. I mean, this morning there's some suggestion in the press that the new Prime Minister may well look to really turbocharge insourcing. So I think the LATCo model is a perfect complement to that. And at the same time, I think it's really important to go back to what we're trying to achieve. And if it's about preventative, and if it's about redesigning services for residents, as Anna talks about, then the LATCo model gives that element of flexibility. We were very recently, we had the Stronger Things conference for New Local, and I'd encourage anybody that's kind of interested in how you can really leverage social value to get along to that conference next year, because it really helps put it in perspective and think about the value add you can truly deliver when you focus on preventative. And I think LATCo gives you that flex to do it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would completely endorse your sort of sense of where things might be moving politically. I was going to say the same. I think, it's early days. Andy's not Prime Minister yet. He will be shortly. And I think he's already indicated some quite strong feelings and instincts about, outsourcing, insourcing, and the sense that the public, community, people in communities and their representatives in local government want to ensure that they have a higher degree, not necessarily of ownership or control, but certainly of influence over how services are designed and delivered. And I think, the LATCo model is so interesting in that context, because as you say, it's that sort of hybrid that can give you that efficiency, but can also give you that alignment of public service values.
No, it's a great message to end on. Thank you to both of you for a really insightful chat. If our listeners want to connect with you both, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
You can find me on New Local's website. My email address is arandle@newlocal.org.uk, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
I'll follow Anna's lead, and so you can find us on our website, which is norsegroup.co.uk. You can find me on my LinkedIn profile, which is Justin Galliford, or you could drop me an email at justin.galliford@norsegroup.co.uk.
Brilliant. I'm sure that people will find their way to those via those routes. Thanks so much for the conversation once again, and enjoy the rest of PF Live 2026.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You've been listening to an episode of our Public Finance Live podcast series, brought to you by the PF editorial team directly from CIPFA's 2026 annual conference in London, England. You can listen to our full series of episodes on the big issues being discussed at this year's conference by searching PF Live wherever you get your podcasts.